Hi everyone, I am Venice Nesperos from the College of Forestry and Natural Resources. My topic for this presentation is freshwater ecosystem conservation principles versus policies, and is based on the paper of Jamie Pittock and Max Finlayson in 2011, in which the Australia's Murray-Darling Basin is the area of concern. First, I will be defining terms as well as providing background information of some concept for us to be on the same page. So I will be defining first the freshwater ecosystem. As defined in the paper, it embraces rivers, floodplains, groundwater-dependent ecosystems, lakes, and estuaries. It can also be interchangeably described as inland water biodiversity, as defined by the Convention on Biological Diversity or CBD, freshwater biomes, wetlands, as defined by the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. When we say wetlands, Ramsar broadly defines wetlands to include all freshwater plus coastal ecosystems, which are up to 6 meters in depth. Coastal wetlands includes all coastlines, mangroves, salt marshes, estuaries, lagoons, seagrass meadows, and coral reefs. Freshwater, though comprise only of less than 1% of the Earth's water, it is extremely valuable for our survival. However, freshwater ecosystems globally are threatened, overexploited, and poorly conserved. Next are conservation. It is a planned management of the natural resource to prevent exploitation, destruction, or neglect. When we say principle, it is a basic idea or rule that explains or controls how something happens or works. For the word policy, it is a plan or a course of action as of a government, political party, or business intended to influence and determine decisions, actions, and other matters. Starting in the 1970s, Australia joined other countries in adopting multilateral environmental agreements and in developing conservation targets and measures to conserve freshwater biodiversity. These actions were taken in response to growing concerns about the state of ecosystems around the world. So let us go now to the overview of the two influential conservation treaties on wetlands that Australia signed and upon which the federal government derives a large portion of its constitutional mandate for management of its wetlands. The first convention is the Convention on Wetlands of International Importance, more commonly known as the Ramsar Convention. It is an international agreement promoting the conservation and wise use of wetlands. It is the only global treaty to focus on a single ecosystem. The Ramsar Convention today has 168 contracting parties and is so named for the city in Iran where the treaty was signed in 1971. Through this agreement, member countries positively commit to wise use of all their wetlands, designating site for the Ramsar list of wetlands of international importance, and also their conservation. For the second convention, it is the Convention on Biological Diversity, known informally as the Biodiversity Convention. It is a multilateral treaty which was ratified by 196 nations 27 years ago. CBD has three main goals that members must comply. First, the conservation of biological diversity. Second, the sustainable use of its components, and lastly, a fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from genetic resources. A common principle of both the CBD and Ramsar and an obligation on their members is the identification, conservation, and protection of sites that are representative of the diversity of freshwater ecosystems, such as the different wetland types identified by Ramsar. However, these environmental agreements have weak enforcement provisions in international law. So here's the picture of the Murray-Darling Basin of Australia. Rivers of the basin are home to more than 2 million people, and as you can see in the map, it covers 1 million square kilometers and contains the longest river system, has diverse species and ecosystems, nearly 57,000 square kilometers of wetlands, and 16 wetlands listed as internationally important under Ramsar. However, in the 2007 audit of the 23 river valleys in the basin, only one was in good condition. And as you can see in the figure, 90% of the water in the basin is being used to irrigate agricultural lands. The basin's freshwater ecosystems are declining primarily because of over-extraction of water for consumptive uses, a threat that may now be exacerbated by climate change. The real possibility of environmental failure now threatens the long-term economic and social viability of many industries and the economic, social, and cultural strength of many communities. So in 2007, the Water Act of the federal government created a new group called the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, with a remit to develop and supervise a framework for the management of the basin's water. Its main job is to create a basin plan that made sure people were not taking too much water out of the river, and it had to get all the states involved to agree, because what happens at one end of the river makes a huge difference to the other. Let us know the various point of view of the principle or design side and the policy side which the government is part of, because narratives emerging from the interaction between the principle and the policy set the common language for understanding complex environmental issues. The first issue in the plan is the area of wetlands. MDBA distinguished only 25,000 square kilometers of wetlands, while it is just 44% of the total actual area of the wetlands. By distinguishing 25,000 square kilometers of wetlands, MDBA does not appear to understand the broad definition of a wetland under the Ramsar Convention. This figure alone has a huge impact to the conservation process that the basin needs for its rehabilitation. Second, the extent of the freshwater ecosystems to conserve. MDBA proposed to conserve only the natural, rare, or unique ecosystems that are vital habitat of listed migratory and threatened species, while as required by the Convention, representative examples of wetland biota for conservation should be identified and be included in the conservation process. These areas may be the higher elevations of floodplains, higher parts of catchments and minor tributaries, and areas which are disconnected from the rivers. Third, the wise use of all wetlands and conservation targets. The Ramsar Convention requires the wise use of all wetlands, which is defined as the maintenance of their ecological character. When we say ecological character, it is defined as the combination of the ecosystem components, processes, and benefits that characterize the wetland at a given point in time. Going back to the Basin Plan, MDBA proposed to conserve only 75% of the Chawila Red Gum forest. The proposal not to conserve 25% of the Red Gum forest amounts to a significant change in wetland character, since larger areas of the black box and other wetlands will be less frequently watered. Fourth, the ecosystem services. The Basin Plan considers only ecosystem functions. It is defined as the fundamental physical, chemical, and biological processes that support the basin's environmental asset. While it is suggested that ecosystem services approach should be used because it brings together ecological and socio-economic values, the failure of the basic plan to fully use the ecosystem services approach omits measures required to maintain key services and also miss an opportunity to clearly assess and explain the links between a healthy ecosystem and the well-being of people in the basin. Fifth, the water reallocation. MDBA proposed a return of 3,000 to 4,000 gigaliters of water per year. This is to achieve their 75% REDCOM target for conservation. More than that figure would have unacceptable socio-economic impacts according to them. The proposed return is insufficient to conserve more than 75% of the REDCOM floodplain forest in the designated Ramsar wetlands of international importance. The threats to wetland would exacerbate by the minimal measures proposed to manage emerging risk to water supplies with climate change. A further concern in the guide is the limited consideration given to managing risk of reduced water availability arising from climate change. The guide proposes managing climate risk almost entirely by water reallocations and environmental flaws. However, there are more efficient adaptation measures that should be considered, such as reservation of the remaining free-flowing rivers and tributary streams from further water resources development, and re-establishment of riparian vegetation. These measures are likely to change water use in the basin in a more sustainable manner. For the conclusion, there are major consequences of the MDBA's proposal to manage the basin, such as large areas of wetlands cannot be sustained, and the system would be managed without any substantial ecological capacity to withstand the impacts of unexpected events. Next, the Basin Plan failed to meet threshold for better conservation of wetlands. In particular, omitting measures to conserve a representative range of wetland types and the envisaged loss of ecological character from large areas of Ramsar sites revoke Australia's international obligations. Lastly, stronger environmental measures will provide greater certainty for people in nature and enhance the possibility of maintaining healthy communities across the basin, because a reform plan that again compromises on allocation of adequate water to sustain the basin's wetlands will result in ongoing environmental degradation, another crisis in the next, inevitable drought, and demands for further reform. Although the basin is located entirely within Australia, its management holds lesson for the conservation of an increasing number of river basins globally. I got this statement from Pittock and Finlayson. Australia hints our future, as the vast human population and the demand of its industries intensify competition for a fixed quantity of fresh water. Australia is a warning, and its Shawilla-Ridgum floodplain forest is its intermediate expression. Yes, water is free, but it is not unlimited. Water scarcity will bring war, hunger, sickness, and much more damages to humanity. Humanity that is supposed to be valuing that limited resource. With this paper, I think principles and policies should complement each other, not to fight for who is right, but to decide together for what is better for the environment and humanity. To close this presentation, it is really evident that conservation is much cheaper than rehabilitation. Thank you.